Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, PFAN affiliates, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues, friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's Vienna Energy Forum side event, where we will celebrate a significant milestone for the Private Financing Advisory Network, PFAN. $2 billion investment leveraged as many as 170 PFAN-supported projects since 2006. PFAN is a global network of the climate and clean energy financing expert that mobilizes financing to reduce greenhouse gas emission, contributing to Paris Agreement and sustainable development goals. PFAN advises low-carbon, climate-resilient businesses in developing countries and matches projects to appropriate private financing. It took PFAN 10 years to leverage its first $1 billion in 2016, and in only 5 years, it has doubled its achievements, highlighting its rapid growth over the recent years. And at UNIDO, we have the ambition to further grow PFAN, to continue the journey to further scale up and create the greater transformative impact through this new mechanism. This ambition fits nicely with the theme of the VEF 2021, where action meets ambition. What will be needed to achieve this goal will be discussed in the moderated panel discussion, bringing in perspectives from the 4 main PFAN stakeholders: investors, project developers, PFAN advisors, and funding partners. The approach applied in the context of PFAN to deliver targeted technical assistance to unlock investment is well aligned with UNIDO's own strategy. UNIDO strives for its interventions to achieve higher impact by nurturing selected partnerships and leveraging on the essential role of the private sector in the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Shortening the development phase of scalable projects and businesses and increasing sustainability of commercially viable business models aimed at creating compelling climate investment opportunities to mobilize climate finance, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and empower and accelerate a just transition through the inclusive and sustainable industrial development has become more important than ever. UNIDO, as a specialized agency, only agency focusing on industrial development of United Nations, has an established track record in fomenting strategic alliances with a broad range of stakeholders, especially including the private sector and the organization, is enthusiastic about hosting PFAN alongside our renewable energy and energy efficiency partnership. And distinguished participants, colleagues, friends, reaching the $2 billion investment milestone underlines the significant progress achieved by PFAN over the 15 years since its inception. We are proud, very proud to announce that we are on track with the key scale-up targets we had set ourselves with PFAN Steering Committee back in 2017. A threefold increase in number of projects reaching the financial close and the amount of investment leverage. This achievement is largely thanks to the continued and growing support of committed governments and agencies. I wish here in particular to gratefully acknowledge the contributions over the years from Australia, Austria, Japan, Norway, Sweden, the United States, and the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program. We look forward to working with you and to expand the PFAN and to invite other donors to join us. We are experiencing a growth in the project submissions in climate adaptation, signaling long-term opportunities, very big potentials for PFAN. We are also penetrating the new markets in sub-Saharan Africa and the relatively unexplored the markets like the small island developing states, CIS countries. We do this by leveraging partnerships and expanding linkages to financing instruments, working more closely with financial institutions and investors to source and invest in projects and a business is part of our ambition, our top agenda items. I would like to thank all of you and that have contributed to the achievements of this milestone, and I'm very pleased to reiterate UNIDO's strong support to PFAN. I'm very confident that we can celebrate next milestone of $3 billion soon or very soon. And I wish all of you an inspiring discussion. And once again, welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Leong, let me thank you on behalf of PFAN for your kind words. Your commitment to the initiative has been and still is much appreciated. DG, feel free to stay with us, but we will of course understand if you have other commitment and have to move on.
Okay, thank you. I will stay for a moment and then I have another function. I will leave at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, let us now turn to the panel discussion. PFAN's journey, celebrating the $2 billion milestone and where to go from here. This is what we wish to discuss today. For this, we are fortunate to have 4 distinguished panelists with us, each representing a key stakeholder of PFAN, namely funding partner, project developer, investor, and advisor from the network, and hence providing different perspectives. I kindly invite the audience to post questions to the panel by using the Q&A tab in the platform. We shall come back to some of those towards the end of the session. Please let me extend a warm welcome to Ms. Mette Moglestu. Mette is a senior advisor in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and previously led the Department of Climate, Energy and Environment at the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. It is thanks to the leadership of people like Mette that PFAN is where it is today. Mette, thank you very much for joining us. Would you please start by telling us what is your own journey with PFAN, what it has been, what your role has been, and what, in your view, makes PFAN special?
Thank you very much for the introduction, Patrick, and the invitation to this event. It's always a pleasure to be part of the PFAN family. And thank you also very much to Lee Young, the Director General of UNIDO, for your opening remarks, but also very much for your support for PFAN in UNIDO throughout these years that you have been the host for the initiative. It's been, it's very important that the leadership is following. But just would like to turn back the clock a little bit and reminding us that PFAN is actually coming from a research program under the International Energy Agency and the UNFCCC. Before the name was PFAN, it was named Climate Technology Network. And unlike many development initiatives, this concept has been developed and proven through a long and thorough process. And I think that is part of the reason for the success of PFAN, and that we are actually seeing private finance mobilized into the climate technology sector. Norway was looking for partners to mobilize private capital into the climate change space, and that was how I was introduced to the Climate Technology Network and PFAN, and was part of the steering committee. I was chair of the steering committee, and followed also this research program into UNIDO and PFAN. And the handover to UNIDO, I must say, has been very successful, and very pleased to see now that the border committee can take part in PFAN. Yeah, I think maybe I'll stop there for your first question, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Mette. I can imagine from a perspective of a donor like Norway, there will be a number of opportunities and options to choose from. Can you say a few words about what makes PFAN special? So why PFAN and not something else? What value does PFAN bring to Norway as a funding partner?
I think what is very crucial is the results. It's the actual results. It's the actual cooperation with the private sector. We see in many initiatives that we struggle to manage to get the mechanisms, private sector policies to work, and to find the role of the UN and the donor committee and the private sector, and how to cooperate in a way that actually helps the private sector to move forward. And also from a donor perspective, PFAN is very cheap, has a very low budget for operation compared to the mobilized funds and the capital and the investment from the private sector. So we also see other new and good initiatives coming up, but I think we still need PFAN for quite a long time.
Thank you, Mette. If we try to project ourselves into the future, following this impressive milestone of the 2 billion mobilized, how can we further scale up PFAN and its impact? Is that about more of the same, or do something different?
That I think is one of the bigger question, and also it was also part of the lots of the discussions in the steering committee when I took part in that steering committee. And I think as we have said all the way, keep knitting, keep doing what PFAN is doing well. Do not lose that idea, because it has been proven throughout many years. And when to scale up, I think it is very important to have a good dialogue with the investment community. What kind of products is useful for them? Is it useful to, for example, bundle different projects and sell it? Is it useful now, like Leon was alluding to before we started, to go into the green, to connect with the green bond market? I think maybe it must be done. We also see now that there's a huge change in the finance market, where they are trying to operate in line with the goal of the Paris Agreement, and the financial flows should be in line with the temperature goal. So I think bundling up green bonds, keep doing what you're good at. I think that will be part of the answer, at least.
Fantastic, Mette. I would like to change topic somewhat, if I may. You have been a key supporter of PFAN's work on gender. In fact, it is under your leadership that our governing body issued a resolution calling upon PFAN to mainstream gender. Can you tell us a little bit about the drive and the motivation behind this, and how you see this particular stream of work evolve?
Thank you very much. And this is the gender involvement in the climate space and the private sector and the society as such is a huge priority for Norway as well as other Nordic countries, as you well know. And this is, we are working to include gender in the different mechanisms and efforts that we support. And I must say that when after we got the resolution from that in the steering committee of PFAN, it has been extremely successful, and UNIDO has taken the strategy to heart. Firstly, it started out with PFAN having gender ambassadors that did remarkable work and to promote the gender dimension in the climate technology space. And you also had, I remember, a special call for female developers in West Africa that was very successful. And if I'm not wrong, I think we have Hannah with us here today. That was one of the winners of the Innovation Forum in 2018, and I'm really looking forward to hear more from her and how this call has assisted her company and others in West Africa to move forward. I'd also like to say one thing and why gender in the climate technology space. Women has a tendency to focus more on prevention, and prevention is really something we need in the climate technology and the fight against climate change. So I really think women has a big role to play in the green shift that we are now trying to move forward after the pandemic and the green recovery.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mette. I much appreciate you sharing those insights with us. With this, I would like now to turn to Balaji, if I may. We essentially now go to the heart of PFAN, which is a network of financing advisors who deliver the services on behalf of PFAN. There is no one better positioned to represent that perspective than Mr. M.K. Balaji. Balaji is a specialist leader at Deloitte Consulting, and prior to this, he was a chief of party for USAID, covering 12 countries across South and Southeast Asia for PFAN, during which he mobilized about 600 million for clean energy projects in the region. Balaji, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
What was your biggest contribution to projects reaching financial close? What are you the most proud of?
I think the position of PFAN itself is very, very strategic. We are an honest broker. We understand the needs of the investor and the needs of the project. Projects are ambitious. All our project developers are extremely ambitious, and it's important to work with them to match their expectations with what investors really can or want to do. So in my period when I was managing in Asia, a continuous dialogue between the investors on what and how far they want to stretch, and conveying that to the developers and making the ends meet is very important. We have all often seen that projects begin with very high expectations, and then we have to talk to the investors and see how to make that meet. And that sometimes even means a change in the course of the business strategy, taking it in bits and pieces rather than taking one large leap. And eventually it works out for the developer, but going in steps and working alongside both the investors and the project developers is very important. And that's been a major success. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Balaji. So where would you see the biggest value addition of PFAN to the projects or to the project developer? And how is this role of PFAN perceived by the project developer?
The project developers value us quite a lot because we bring in a much larger experience. It's when they're talking to a mentor, they're not talking to the person, but they're talking to an institution And there's a lot of experience that the institution carries. Different types of projects have been seen. Several financial instruments have been mobilized. So when we kind of suggest to them various options which they have never seen before, and they say, hey, that is a possibility which I have never looked at. So that's a big value add for them, because they are usually not people who have a big financial background. They are project developers, they are technology people, they are the kind of people who build out technologies or plants or run and develop projects. They are not really people who have experienced in the financial world. And so they come with, well, I want this much of money. They don't even know how to quantify the returns. I mean, a PFAN mentor does that very well. The first few questions that we go and ask them is, what is in there for the investor? And that leads to a whole lot of dialogue in helping them phrase their thoughts very clearly, their business model very clearly. So that's a big value add. I mean, that's kind of a standard formula that we use in PFAN.
Great, Balaji. If we look forward for a second, where do you see both the challenges that PFAN should be mindful of moving forward, as well as the opportunities?
Yeah, I think the whole landscape of climate businesses is kind of becoming extremely decentralized, number one. There are a number of pockets of activities. One way is to kind of, like Mette mentioned earlier, to look at opportunities to aggregate them. But aggregation needs that these projects all have the same pedigree of development. They follow, there should be some standards, which are not there when small projects are being developed. So I think PFAN is very well set, because we kind of mentor a number of projects which are of the same type. For example, if you take energy access space, there are a number of mini grids that are being developed, number of solar home systems that are being deployed, but each one is being developed and deployed in a different manner. But if we kind of had a template methodology which everybody follows, it's a lot easier to aggregate and raise funds at a platform level. So that's not just, not unique to energy access. It's there in water access. It's there in other adaptation projects where a mangrove rehabilitation or things like that. I mean, PFAN is very uniquely positioned because we work with a number of similar projects. At any given time, I at least have 2 or 3 projects which look exactly the same. They may be, in the same country or within the same region, and that's a possibility that I see we can play a significant role in.
Thank you, Balaji. And would that focus be on a thematic basis or on a sectoral basis? I mean, you talked about aggregating mini-grid projects, but do you see other areas of work where PFAN can focus to create this aggregation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a mini-grid was just one, or even on generation. I mean, there are a number of, say, run-of-the-river projects across, Latin America or maybe even in several parts of Asia. Again, it's the same thing. The developers are all struggling with the whole data that is required to develop, make these projects bankable, etc. So if we have a very clear methodology, and and we define it, there may be investors who are willing to now put in development capital. I mean, with a strong sponsor or a strong leader like PFAN leading that way. Yeah. So there are lots of areas like that. As I said, starting with mangrove rehabilitation, there is no standardized practice out there. So in every area of climate change adaptation, I think there's a lot of such aggregating possibilities that are there.
Thank you very much, Balaji. Appreciate your comments. Before I turn to Winnie, dear participants, feel free to pose questions in the Q&A tab on the platform. So on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a tab called Q&A. Please feel free to pose questions there that we can then pick up and discuss with the panels. Winnie, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Winnie is the Africa Regional Representative at Developing World Markets, where she is responsible for debt origination. Before that, Winnie worked at IDEV International, an investment advisory and strategy consulting firm, for which she was responsible for origination, structuring, negotiation, and execution of deals in Africa. Winnie, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Patrick. Really glad to be here this morning, and good morning to my fellow panelists.
Winnie, may you also please start by telling us how you got involved with PFAN and in which capacity?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. My journey with PFAN spans many years. Since 2017, I first came across PFAN in Nairobi, where they had a conference, and there was a couple of startups that were being showcased for consideration by investors. I was invited by virtue of being part of the investment community, as at that time I was working for an investment fund domiciled in East Africa. And my role was to help analyze and evaluate these startups to ensure that they were investment ready and they were offering an attractive proposition to investors. That journey has, of course, evolved over the years, where I have supported these startups across different PFAN sessions in Vienna, in Vancouver, and basically now remotely. So it's really good to see how PFAN has evolved, and congratulations on the 2 billion milestone. Really excited about that.
Thank you, Winnie. You mentioned that you were a member of the jury of investor in a couple of the investment forums that PFAN organized.
Yes.
Can you say a few more words about what are you looking at when you look at a project? What are the key attributes from the perspective of an investor that are important to you?
Yes, so a lot of the projects I saw, I always insisted on bankability. And bankability can be split into various aspects. One, does it meet the objective of the fund? So if it's climate change oriented, they need to look for funds that are investing in that space. So if I'm talking to an infrastructure fund, for example, and I'm looking at climate change matters, then that is not relevant. So part of it was aligning your interest with that of the investors. Secondly, it was presenting a deal that one would, deliver a return. And what aspects investors look at is, one, valuation, because for me to determine a return, I need to know what price I'm going to pay for this investment and what I expect to achieve in terms of a return, and what holding period I am expected to have this investment in my books or in my portfolio to then deliver a return for me. So I always spoke about valuation, giving the entrepreneurs a realistic view of how they could present this to investors without necessarily over-exaggerating it or selling themselves short. It was a delicate balance of ensuring that you present, a bankable deal. Part of it was also ensuring that the financial projections were realistic. Some of them presented, of course, realistic, but others were very ambitious. So it was trying to taper down and say, this is what investors would think is reasonable, and this, I think, in my view, would present something bankable. So it was trying to always manage expectations, both sides of the entrepreneurs as well as those of investors, so that the two parties would reach an agreement.
Fantastic, Winnie. Thank you very much. If we look ahead now, with your experience in the market, where do you see the biggest opportunities for PFAN? Is there more potential for PFAN that is currently untapped?
Yes, I think PFAN does a fantastic job in the advisory services it is providing for these entrepreneurs, because investors might not necessarily have the time nor the resources internally to prepare startups or companies that are operating in the renewable energy space. They want to come and find a company that's ready and that they're able to deploy capital into directly. So I think PFAN plays that fantastic role of bridging that gap between being investor ready and actually having the investment deployed into these businesses that are addressing climate change. So I think the opportunity remains, and PFAN is definitely charting a leading role in this space.
Fantastic, Winnie. If we look at PFAN from where you sit, from an investor perspective, can elaborate a little bit on where you see the biggest value added of PFAN for you as an investor?
Yes, so part of what PFAN does is harnessing investors. They bring together investors globally. So I think that value would be fantastic in the sense that if I'm an investor in Africa, I'm able to connect with other investors from other regions and other, geographies. And the idea is co-investment would be a great opportunity to de-risk this investment. Of course, climate change has different elements, and the investments are at different stages. So I think what PFAN does is a way of blending different investors and different stages of companies and entrepreneurs, so that I'm able to either pick up from the previous investor or co-invest, or come together to de-risk the transaction altogether. So I think that is the strategic role that I see PFAN playing, especially for the investors.
Fantastic, Winnie. And this is what's being done now. And what else can we do? How else can PFAN help you in making investment decisions?
Yes, I think having a platform that would allow maybe investors log in and see investments of different stages would be very helpful, so that it's centralized and it's something that maybe PFAN manages centrally, but investors across the globe and different regions can, sign in or become a member and then be able to log in, and at any one point there'd be ready pipeline available. So with this day and age where we are not necessarily able to travel or to meet in person because of COVID, such an initiative would be very welcome, because we're all working, most of us are working, say, remotely. So something like that, digitalizing the platform and having pipeline that's flowing in at different stages for investors would be very helpful.
Many thanks, Winnie. Much appreciated. I would like to turn to Hannah now, and would like to check if you can hear us. I know you had technical difficulties in joining. Hannah, can you hear us? Hannah, you are currently on mute. Can you hear us? Hannah, we can see you, and it seems that you are on mute. If you can unmute yourself and confirm that you can hear us. Hannah, you seem to be still on mute. If you can unmute yourself, there is a button below the pictures. If you can click on the little microphone to unmute yourself. I can see your lips moving, so I think we still have technical difficulties. We will come back to you, Hannah, with your permission. In the meantime, dear panelists, there is a question that has been posted in the chat, and that is about PFAN working in difficult contexts. So the question is, how does PFAN deal with situations in countries where, due to deteriorating fiscal conditions, it might make exits more complicated for investors? So this is about working in difficult conditions. May I turn to Winnie or Balaji for addressing the question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. I think part of what, in my view, PFAN can do, because of all the developing partners that it works with, is maybe develop a guarantee fund down the road for investors. In the event that, one or two of the investments went bust, how can they help investors recover their funds? And this would be maybe a staged exit where at least you recover like 50% upfront, and then the others are, spread out over a period of time. So I think a guarantee fund of sorts would make sense, just so that it provides a first loss provision to investors who are operating in difficult environments, or who have experienced maybe a force majeure of sorts in say like war or terrorist acts of terrorism, whereby you're not able to recover any of your investments. So I think this is something that maybe PFAN can consider exploring, given that it's working with amazing development partners like the Austria Development Bank, amongst other DFIs. So I think these are some of the steps that can be taken to mitigate risk and losses for investors in this hard operating environments.
Thank you, Winnie. I do have a question directly to Balaji. And before I come to you, Balaji, I just want to check with Hannah. Hannah, can you please unmute your microphone just to check whether we can hear you? I think we still have an issue. You are still on mute. I'll come back to you. Apologies, Hannah. Balaji, the question to you is with regards to the project developers. Do you see pattern in terms of weaknesses among the project developers?
Yeah, I mean, they usually are very ambitious, number one. Number two is we also see now quite a different type of business offering, right? And many of them are, especially say for in the energy space, we see a lot of them coming as a service model, right? Energy as a service or whatever they offer as a service model. So they are not usually aware of valuation methods, or they exaggerate their valuation, and they are so strong with. They are impressed with their own technology. So one thing is they love their technology. They're selling their technology rather than presenting their business. So that's another big challenge that we see. So their understanding of how to conduct a more realistic valuation that they can defend in front of investors. Because the moment they can't defend some of their assumptions, then they lose credibility immediately. So it's very important for us to work with those kind of businesses, especially to do the reality check with them periodically, and so that they are prepared to defend their valuation properly. So that's a big challenge. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Balaji. I do have a question on gender, and I'm tempted to turn to Mette, if I may. And the question is about a gender bias in clean tech finance. Is there a bias, and how can we support women entrepreneurs to take the lead? That is the question.
Thank you for that question, Patrick. I'm not sure whether I am the right one to respond when I hear Winnie and the others talking so expertly about what's really happening on the ground and how you can actually make the deals go forward, and what are the different actors' role, and how can the gender issue, how is the gender issue part of that. What I do really see is that it is clear, that, like I just said earlier, that we do see that when women are involved, the businesses are actually going very well. So that, when we see that, when you have gender indexes, for example, on the stock exchanges, these businesses are doing very well. So I mean, I think the business case for involving women is already done, and it is more a question of how to do it. And I'd also like to hear more from the other panelists that are actually doing the business, also to hear their perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mette. We'd like to turn to Hannah once again to try if we can hear you, if you are able to unmute yourself and say a few words just to check whether we can hear you. I think we are still facing difficulties. If Anna from Volves Digital managing the platform could help us unmute Hannah, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. In the meantime, a question from my side. We have seen recently a proliferation of so-called project preparation facilities. So those are initiatives which, like PFAN, are active in supporting sustainable investments. What should PFAN do in order to remain relevant and competitive in this increasingly crowded space? Are we looking at more coordination, or should we rather bank onto competition. If there are views in the panel, I would welcome those.
Well, I think we should not be worried about that. This is my submission, because we have a head start. We have proven the market knows us. We equate very well with project developers. We have mentors and a network who are people who have practically worked in the field. Many of these project preparation facilities have staffing which are more like pure like development consultants. Whereas in PFANs network, you have real financiers, project developing people who have actually developed and delivered projects. So the qualification of our network partners by itself is something. When we sit in front of a project developer, we can talk their language much better than a project preparation facility, which is more like development goals oriented. So I'm not really, I think we can take them head on. But there could be synergies also, because they also will need someone who will then do the last mile work with the developers. And that's something which we really do very well. So I think we need not worry about them, and there are places that we can really cooperate with them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Balaji. Winnie, we have a question from Laura in the chat. And it is similar to what we discussed during the first phase of the session. But if you could add a little bit of color, and the question is, what are the critical success points for projects to receive funding?
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Laura, for the good question. Yes, investors always want bankable projects that they are sure would return their investment back. And typically that involves a couple of things. One, has the pilot been proven? Has it been successful? And also, is the market receptive to this product or service? Because for you to have or generate revenue, you need to have a bankable project or idea, but also you have to have a market, an addressable market. So once you've done the pilot and you've proven that there's actually a market for this product or service, then the next stage would be now to source for investment that would help you scale. So part of also what investors are looking for are scalable solutions, be a product or a service that is being provided. So scalability is key. Meeting the needs of the market, addressable market is key. And thirdly, you have to have then financial projections that are realistic, because you have then scoped your market and seen that, per unit of what I'm selling, of my product or my service, would generate X amount. So I find for most of the projects that I have screened under PFAN, the entrepreneurs are not very specific about the unit economics. And that's something that investors always want to see, that per unit, how am I generating income? And is it profitable in the first place? Or am I then just making losses at the unit level? And then how about my operating expenses? How am I going to cover that? So investors want to see financial projections that are realistic and unit costs that also are generating profitability, so that when you take out your operating costs and your taxes, you still remain a profitable entity. So on the financial projections, you need to present that. And then, of course, there is the element of valuation, which I had alluded to at the beginning, where we want to have realistic expectations, and this can be addressed using different financing instruments. So one, if the company is still very early stage, grants would be preferred. Either it's a refundable or non-refundable grant, which helps you get to a level where then you're profitable. Subsequent to that, you can look for seed capital, whereby you have investors bringing in small amounts of capital for you to get to a certain level, and then you can start raising larger sums of capital through equity structures, convertible debt structures, and finally using senior debt, because senior debt financials require strong cash flows coming to repay the debt. So as you're still developing at the various stages of the business or the idea, you'll have various forms of capital available at your disposal. And I think that is the benefit that, as I was alluding to, that PFAN brings by bringing a a melange of different investors that can come in at different stages of the development of the project. So I think these are the main things that investors will look for. Of course, you have to be aligned in terms of your interests. So if it's an investor who's keen on renewable energy, they will not be they'll not have the same requirements as maybe someone who's investing in infrastructure or real estate. So you find that you need to have aligned interests right from the beginning for you to even proceed to the next stage. So in summary, that would be it. And that is what investors typically would look for in a bankable project.
Thank you very much, Winnie. Sorry to go back, but Mette, you might have a view on the discussion about coordinating with other PFAN-like initiatives and mechanisms. Do you want to share your thoughts there?
Thank you, Patrick. Just coming back to the question that you posed a few minutes ago, and it's like you said, it's coming different initiatives now, but the challenge is so huge, and so I really believe that there is space for PFAN, there is space for the others. What I think is important is that PFAN is based on public donor funds, and I would really appreciate if PFAN, could use some efforts to share their lessons learned with others. Of course, the others can be seen as a competition, but PFAN has a particular role to play because it is part of the global effort towards greener development. So I think lessons learned from PFAN into the other platforms is crucial. And I would also like to say that because PFAN is so successful in mobilizing private capital, I must say I haven't seen it in the other initiatives. The results that you have, you are attractive for other mechanisms, and then there is a balance with how much time you should spend on the others, and how much on your core business. And of course, that is a fine balance to strike, but you need to spend the time on both, and always crowd in the private sector, never crowd them out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mette. One last question for Balaji, if I may. Balaji, historically, the project developer has been the main beneficiary, if I can put it this way, of PFAN. So the focus is on the project developer. There has been discussion on the extent to which we should get closer to the investors and to some extent retro-engineer our process to feed project and pipeline for investors, particular investors or particular funds. What is your view on the matter? How close should PFAN be to the money, or should there be should we stay at an arm's length? Okay? Can you say a few words about your perspective there?
Yeah, I think getting too close could probably result in a situation where we get narrowed down with the choice of just working with those. So an arm's length is fine. At one point in Asia, there was someone who was looking to raise financing. They exactly said this. They came to us and said, well, give us your entire pipeline because that's a great story. You have 200 projects and stuff like that. So we said, we won't give you the pipeline, but we can give you a broad trends. So we look at these countries, these type of projects, we can give you those kind of trends, right? So we cannot share with you the raw data, but we can give you the trends. And that may help them in their own fundraise thesis. And they can then validate with the respective countries. But if we just work with the investors, helping them raise funds on the back of our pipeline, then PFAN would rather do that ourselves. I think we would narrow our choices than working with just that investor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Balaji. Dear participants, it is unfortunate that Hannah faced technical difficulties in joining the panel. It would have been fantastic to hear the perspective from a project that has been quite successful. This is what it is. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Drawing this to a close, I would like to go around the panelists, if I may, and ask you for what would be the one tip or one advice you would wish to give to PFAN for the future? Okay, mindful of the fact that we got to this critical milestone of 2 billion and we are now looking into the future. What is the one piece of advice that you would like to give to PFAN from your respective perspective? If I may start with Winnie.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Having seen PFAN grow over the years, it's been a real pleasure. And my piece of advice would be to take it to the next level. As I said, consider having a form of a guarantee fund, a first loss guarantee fund for investors. I think this would make this a very attractive proposition for any investor coming into the renewable energy or climate change space. So I think that would be what I would advise, just because investors sometimes fear that, downside. So I think the next phase would be to offer credit enhancement or investment enhancement in one way or another. So that's my piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winnie. Mette, your one piece of advice for PFAN, please.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you also to Winnie for her very good advice, which I think is an important step forward. My advice would be to keep doing what PFAN is good at, and also spend time on your next step. Make sure it's as successful as the basic idea. Even if what kind of direction you go, make sure that you go the right way and take your time. We will support you.
Many thanks, Mette. Balaji, please, your one piece of advice for PFAN.
Yeah, I think expanding our network, because evolving business models that are happening out there, so we can strengthen our own work with more experts who are tuned to these evolving business models, and in those sectors where we are also expanding, because climate change adaptation is making us go just beyond energy or clean energy that we were traditionally operating in. So I think expansion of our network is very important. We can use the same qualification criteria for experts from various other sectors. That will also bring in more projects.
Fantastic, Balaji. Many thanks. Dear participants, what a journey PFAN has completed. It started with the perception that clean energy investments in developing countries needed technical assistance to scale up. Developing a pipeline of investment-ready projects and introducing those to prospective investors. That was the vision which led to us celebrating this fantastic achievement, $2 billion mobilized. We are grateful for the leadership of the funding partners of PFAN along the years. We appreciate the trust that the entrepreneurs place in PFAN services. We are pleased with the collaboration established with the investors we interact with, and we are particularly appreciative of the dedication of the network of financing advisors across the globe. Left for me is to thank heartily my Director General for joining us today, our distinguished panelists for their insightful contribution to the discussion, my colleagues in the PFAN team for preparing this event, Andrea and Marco in particular, and to the audience joining the celebration and asking pertinent questions. I open a parenthesis for the PFAN affiliates to note that we will reconnect via another platform immediately after this event for our virtual cocktail party. Else, with this, on behalf of PFAN, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to further interaction with you. Please visit our website, pfan.net, and get in touch with us. Thank you for your participation, and goodbye all.